we need to talk about tipping.
From dine-in restaurants to even the vet's office, the pressure to tip has reached a tipping point.
What is the service that this tip is for?
Specifically, tipping in America.
30% of Americans think that tipping culture is out of control.
I don't tip.
What do you mean you don't tip?
You don't believe in it.
Shut up.
Are you okay? Yeah.
There's no escaping the iPad swiveled in your face. Is 15% enough? No, it's more like 20% now, right? I mean, I should tip more because I don't want to seem like an asshole. I'm not an asshole, right? Do I have to tip when I get carryout? I mean, I came and I picked it up. Has it always been like this? Breathe. It's not just you.
That's a good tip. That's 25%. What do you mean? Okay, can I take Apple Pay?
The real reason tipping has gotten so frustrating is because your wallet is actually subsidizing the payroll for large corporate chains across the country. Millions of workers in America are paid a shockingly low tipped minimum wage of $2.13 an hour. That means they have to rely on a customer's tips to make a living wage. The $2.13 an hour tipped wage has been frozen since 1991. And to add to that frustration, tipping laws are incredibly confusing and inconsistent. If you took a road trip across the country and tipped 20% everywhere you went, your money would have a radically different impact on the workers you're interacting with, depending on what type of worker they are and what state they're employed in. So even if you're trying to do the right thing, you and the workers you're trying to show appreciation for are both getting ripped off. But if everyone is mad, why don't things change? Because there is one powerful lobby who's happy with the way things are and has been working behind the scenes for over a century to keep tipping broken for all of us. In this video, we'll break down the history of tipping. We'll talk to the people on the front lines challenging the tipping norms and fighting for their right to a living wage. And we'll talk about who exactly is benefiting from the broken status quo. This is the Classroom for More Perfect Union, and today we're talking about tipping. North America is the only region in the world that has this kind of tipping culture. And why is North America so behind? Basically, it can be all tied back to one lobbying group determined to keep workers and customers frustrated while they make more money for themselves. They're called the National Restaurant Association. They play a big role in all of this, and we'll get back to them in a minute, but first we have to go back farther and look at how the tipping practice arrived in this country. It's the 1850s, and rich Americans traveling to Europe are taking notice of a unique custom here where aristocrats give their servants small amounts of money to acknowledge their work. They called it tipping. The rich Americans were like, whoa, that's dope, let's try this back home. But back in America, people were not into this tipping idea. The everyday barmaid was like, yeah, no, I have 4 kids and can't afford this. And the European immigrants were like, absolutely not. We just left this aristocrat nonsense and we are not bringing that energy here. The whole concept was seen as anti-democratic and deeply un-American. But in 1860, something big happened: emancipation. Now there was this huge population of newly freed Black men and women looking for work. White business owners knew they could exploit these vulnerabilities and pay Black Americans as little as possible. They remembered that tipping system from Europe and they thought they might give it a try. Only this time, they were going to do it their own way. They thought, what if instead of paying these people a wage, we ask the customer to provide a small tip for their service, and then these workers can live solely off of that.
Why should it be your burden of responsibility to give me all this money?
In the restaurant and railroad industry, this became the standard, and the mutated American version of tipping was officially a go. Tips had replaced wages. But over in Chicago, the long hours and little pay for porters in the Pullman Car Company became too much. So after years of fighting and organizing under the leadership of Philip Randolph, they successfully created a union that guaranteed them a wage. It was an incredible win for these men. But not everybody was happy about this. Restaurants were taking notice of these workers fighting for a fair wage, and they didn't want this happening. So to ensure cheap labor, they banded together and formed the National Restaurant Association. The NRA's lobbying efforts were clear from the beginning: pay workers as little as legally possible. Cut to 1938, hello Great Depression and economic turmoil. The government steps in with the New Deal and creates the first federal minimum wage of 25 cents an hour. Now all workers in this country were guaranteed to be paid a wage at the minimum, except tipped restaurant workers. They were left out of the bill. Why? Because of NRA lobbying. 30 years later, during the Civil Rights era, mounting pressure from the Black community pushed Congress to finally address tipped restaurant workers making a wage. But instead of giving them the minimum, Congress added a tip credit that guaranteed these workers a sub-minimum wage. This meant workers could legally be paid less than the minimum wage because, theoretically, the tips they got from customers would make up the difference. And if their tips didn't bring their take-home pay up to the minimum wage, their employer legally had to pay them that missing difference. Make sense?
Depending on what shift you end up with and what time of year it is, you kind of can end up pretty easily getting screwed by not having enough hours. Technically, they're supposed to balance it out anyway, but it can be a lot to expect and hope for if you're not already making a livable wage, you know?
The sub-minimum wage stayed 50% below the federal minimum wage for decades until 1991, when tipped restaurant workers were making $2.13 an hour. That rate hasn't changed since 1991. Currently, right now, in 2023, nearly 20 states legally pay tipped restaurant workers $2.13 an hour. Others pay just cents more than that.
When you are paying sub-minimum wage, your workers are living in poverty. That's just the bottom line. I was living in poverty. Your rent is $1,500. So you have to hustle, put up with all kind of sexual harassment, put up with all kind of everything from your boss, from your customers, so you can make it.
Do you know what it means when somebody pays you minimum wage? You know what your boss was trying to say? It's like, hey, if I could pay you less, I would. But it's against the law.
The sub-minimum wage doesn't just apply to tipped workers. It also applies to people with disabilities, youth, and those who are incarcerated. In Alabama, for example, workers under the age of 20 can make as little as $4.25 an hour for their first 90 days of employment. These people are doing the same work as everybody else, but they're being paid less purely because they're younger. Only 7 states mandate that all workers, regardless of tips, must be paid the full state minimum wage. Why so few states, you might ask? The NRA.
From my cold, dead hands.
The other NRA. Today, the National Restaurant Association is driven by large corporate chains, and they spend millions on political lobbying that makes the lives of restaurant workers harder. The NRA's lobby is so massive, it's really hard to explain just how deep they're in with Congress. Here's one example. Remember how I mentioned the sub-minimum wage has stayed $2.13 since 1991? That's because of Herman Cain.
Is this a great country or what?
Today, I am announcing that I am running for President of the United States of America.
Before he ran for president, he got his start working as a mathematician for Coca-Cola, then managed hundreds of Burger Kings, and eventually became CEO of a popular pizza chain.
Enjoy your Godfather's pizza.
His junk food career path led him to become head of the National Restaurant Association. In the 90s, he struck a deal with Clinton and the Democrats, saying they could raise the overall minimum wage to $5.15 as long as they kept the sub-minimum wage frozen forever at $2.13 an hour. And that's exactly where it remains today, frozen. You know, never mind the fact that you can't even get a coffee at McDonald's for $2 anymore, but whatever, moving on. This same kind of deal happened in New York when they raised the minimum wage to $17 an hour and left out tipped workers. This is what the NRA fights for, and where does their large lobbying budget come from? Some of it comes from the membership dues paid by the chains like McDonald's and Starbucks, but a lot of it comes directly from the wallets of the workers they're exploiting. A New York Times investigation showed how the NRA's lobbying budget has come from charging millions of waiters and cooks mandatory food safety courses. That means workers have been unknowingly giving their money to a group that acts directly against their interests and lobbies to keep their wages as low as possible. Okay, but what does the NRA have to say for themselves? The NRA plays a very clever trick. They pit the livelihoods of small businesses and tipped workers against each other, as if the two are always mutually exclusive. They like to claim that mom and pop restaurants simply cannot survive if they pay their employees a full minimum wage. It's a fear tactic that works because who doesn't want to protect small businesses? They're leveraging the vulnerabilities of small businesses to spread their agenda and keep wages low. The reality is consumer spending is higher when people are paid more. 2 One Fair Wage studies compared California, which is a state without a sub-minimum wage, to Maryland and New York, which are states with a sub-minimum wage. The study found that California had the highest rate of restaurant sales. California also had a larger small business growth rate in the restaurant industry compared to New York. And what's crazy is the NRA knows small businesses can survive if they're paid higher wages. They know this. During a shareholders meeting in 2021, the Denny's CFO told investors that the California law raising the minimum wage to $15 actually improved business.
They had 6 consecutive years of positive guest traffic, not just positive sales, but positive guest traffic as the minimum wage was going up, putting money into the pockets of our consumers to spend back with us. So we actually have seen the benefit of minimum wage in a tempered way.
This means that after years of fighting against minimum wage increases and insisting doing so would kill restaurants, these restaurants in the NRA were actually like, never mind, we're good, actually we'll be fine, there's nothing to worry about here. Another talking point the NRA has is insisting that with the tip credit, workers never actually make $2.13 an hour, and that employers who allow this are breaking the law. Over a third of tipped workers report their tips and wages did not bring them up to their state's minimum wage. The US is the only country who has a tipping system like this. This is a uniquely American problem. There is good news in this story. We are in an extremely historic time for workers. Let's go back to Chicago, the same city where the Pullman Porters unionized almost 100 years ago. The Chicago City Council is about to pass legislation that would phase out the sub-minimum wage there. That means tipped workers in Chicago will make at least $15.80 an hour with tips paid on top.
This is going to be so historical when one fair wage passes here in Chicago. Is going to be national news because it started here.
The One Fair Wage Ordinance had so much energy behind it, from workers to local aldermen to Mayor Brandon Johnson, that even the Illinois Restaurant Association came out and supported the move, securing a compromise to phase the wage increase over 5 years. And the NRA is furious at the IRA. I mean, if I was the NRA, I'd be furious too. Think about it. Chicago is the largest American city to independently phase out the sub-minimum wage. This could have a huge impact across the country. In over a dozen states, there are bills moving right now to push for the same thing. Over 1 million workers have left the restaurant industry, and 80% say the only thing that would bring them back is a full, livable wage guaranteed by law.
I love what I do. It's the passion to see somebody happy, or you fixing something that they like, and they enjoy it.
Restaurant owners, most of them do want to treat their workers right, do want to make sure that they're taking care of their workers. If low wages is a higher turnover rate, higher wages is a low turnover rate, because it shows that you actually care about your worker.
There's a way to get this done where the CEOs and the leadership are not the only ones that can feed their families and go on vacation and enjoy life.
And so now workers have a choice. There's no going back to sub-minimum wages. Now it's just painting it for us and the next generation to come.
We will come back to work because it's livable now.
So, should you stop tipping? No. Tips are a great way to appreciate workers providing you a service on top of their wage, but they shouldn't be used as a replacement for a living wage.
That means I want a $15 an hourly wage on top of my tips on top.
We started this video complaining about how frustrating tipping is in America, and we learned that the reason it's like this is directly because of how tipping started and the fact that we use it as a replacement for a wage. The only way to fix this is to reapproach how we dine out. The responsibility of a wage should not be on the customer. We have to eliminate the sub-minimum wage and pay people fairly. Before you go, please support our work by liking this video and subscribing to our channel. Thanks for watching The Classroom. We're always looking to tell more stories like this one, unpacking economic systems that impact all of our daily lives. So what other issues do you want to see us cover? Let us know in the comments. And again, don't forget to like and subscribe.